In today's world, so many men are working through and thinking about the issues of masculinity, toxic masculinity, and their calling. So what does healthy masculinity look like? What does a man's calling look like? How does a man discover his calling? My guests today, Rory and Matt, have great insight into these issues and lots more in a fun and important conversation. Rory Lawrence is the founder of the Dangerous Man podcast, husband to Jenni, father to 3 children, brother to 7 siblings, and a pastor to Legacy Church. He holds a deep desire to help all men discover their true masculine and dangerous selves. Rory has conquered hell on earth many times, overcoming some of life's most difficult battles, and he continues to turn that pain into purpose. Masculinity is a pursuit he believes brings revelation to a man's heart of who he is from the God who designed it. Real biblical masculinity is embraced when it deepens a man's understanding and ability to live out the unique calling on his life as a dangerous man. Matt Fortin is the co-founder of the Dangerous Man podcast. He's a loving husband to his wife Becca, and he became motivated to inspire men to be the best version of themselves after being surrounded by great examples of men all throughout his life. Matt has always been drawn to mental toughness, discipline, and drive, and those values pushed him to carry out his Division I baseball dream at Seton Hall University. Matt's a firm believer that all he has learned in athletics has helped him define his conception of manhood. You can find their podcast and connect with them at dangerousmanpodcast.com. Hey, Rory. Hey, Matt. Great to have you guys here today. I'm looking forward to talking with you guys.
What's going on, Warren?
Yeah, how we doing, Warren? Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're talking about calling. We're talking about potential, these huge topics, but I want to start with something from your own website. And I just love it. You have a line on there. It says your masculinity isn't toxic, it's missing. It's just an awesome, great line. So let's just dig into that. Start with that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So our deal is, a lot of people, in modern times now is, you hear this term toxic masculinity, and it's absolutely infuriating because most of the guys, what I would say for most men, their masculinity isn't toxic. It's missing. It's not found. And what we need to be doing as men is finding our masculinity the way the Bible determines it, the way that God defines it. Because for most of us, our masculinity is missing. We haven't learned it, whether dad was absent or dad didn't teach us. Maybe he was there, but he wasn't teaching. Maybe he wasn't leading. One of the most greatest epidemics that this world is facing is a fatherless and a leaderless epidemic when it comes to men. We're not leading our men to become men. So now what you have is a bunch of men you have a bunch of boys aging into manhood, and they're still acting like boys for the rest of their life. It's incredibly destructive. And so when we say your masculinity is not toxic, it's missing, is what we're saying is, hey, you don't have a defining line of what your masculinity is. You don't have a calling to what your masculinity is. You don't have a true biblical, definition to what your masculinity is. And so that's what we mean by saying that. We tend to get a little confrontational when it comes to those things, because when you find your masculinity through God who designed it, when you find that, oh my gosh, Warren, you know just as well as we do, it is one of the most empowering, strengthening, life-defining moments of your manhood to be able to walk in, when you know that, hey, this is what real biblical masculinity is. And when you find it, man, it's like nothing else, brother.
So how does the guy do that? How does the guy find it? Where does he go? How does he do it? How's that happen?
There's a vending machine on 2nd Avenue. You pop a couple quarters in, it pulls out.
Nah, it's inflation now. You got to put in a few dollars. You can't do quarters anymore. Yeah. Yeah. We've got inflation.
Quarters don't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, Warren, I will say
Go
this.
ahead, Matt.
There we go.
You got it.
I will say that I am currently in the process of kind of rediscovering my masculinity a little bit. And some things that I've been doing is taking a couple books. John Elder's book, Wild at Heart, read that a couple times over the last 2 years. And just rediscovering, my heart and what God wants for me and my calling in my life. And another one, Heart of a Warrior, by Michael Thompson. Two great books for men out there that are looking, that are just like, where do I start? I want to, I hear about masculinity and like, I know I want to be the man, the tough macho man, but I don't know where to start. Maybe, they didn't have, their father wasn't around. Maybe their mother coddled them a little too much, and so mama's boy, and they haven't really embraced their true masculinity. I think those books are two really good places to start. Because in the church today, depending on where you go to church, it is very tough to find that in the church, especially the men that are
churches don't preach to men.
Correct. And
most churches don't preach to men.
And that group of men usually isn't in the church. Just like Rory said, it's catered to women. The worship music is high pitched. Men can't even sing along to half the songs. It's
true. Dude, it's true.
And then you just sit them down in church and say, give me all your money.
Don't sit down, shut up, behave yourselves. Don't cuss, don't smoke, don't drink. Open up your wallet.
Yeah.
So Matt, what was something you mentioned? Wild at Heart. These are super awesome books, great books, well known. What was something that you've pulled out of those? What was something you discovered for yourself in there?
Just that my heart just had to be rediscovered and reshapen. I had listened to so many lies over the years that the enemy was, putting in my head, and I was entertaining those thoughts and saying, maybe I'm not the man that I was supposed to be, and I don't know how I'm gonna get there. And it just understanding the thoughts that come into your head and being able to filter through them and saying, okay, that's definitely not something I would think, or no, that one's definitely from the enemy. I'm not even entertaining that. I rebuke it right now. God help me like rediscover what show me the truth and what you say and what you think about me. So it's a daily conversation with yourself and being able to filter out those thoughts, because you get something like 10,000 thoughts, or I don't know.
There's like 70 or 80,000 thoughts a day,
and it's
and more than half of them are negative. That's crazy.
And so Rory,
that was Matt, something. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt mentioned lies there, enemy lies. That's a super common theme. What are some lies that you maybe have had to deal with, or that guys all over are dealing with when it comes to this stuff?
All right, so let's make it personal. So lies that I have had to face. It's about to get dirty. You ready?
Yeah.
One of the major lies that I had to face, probably in like late into my 20s. I'm 42 now, but late into my 20s. One of the lies that I faced was, you're not a man, because I actually went through 2 years of violent domestic abuse. One of the most incredibly challenging 2 years, because for one, I didn't say anything because, well, you figure as a man, I'm behind the status quo. Nobody's going to believe me. No one's going to believe that. Are you kidding me? A woman who's 98 pounds soaking wet is abusing you? No, you're not a man. So I know that's a little bit of a shocker, but for 2 years, this woman would violently control my life, and it was absolutely emasculating to the nth degree. So one of the lies that I embraced was, you're not a man. You're not a man. Because if you were a man, you wouldn't have let this happen. You wouldn't have tolerated this. You wouldn't have allowed this person to take that from you. And so after 2 years, I began the soul crushing or soul rebuilding process of trying to unlearn all the things that I had believed in the abuse. And one of the major lies was, you're not a man, because a man wouldn't allow this to happen. What I realized over time was Hey, no, actually, a very strong man would deal with this because you're gonna take this is just one of the greatest things that men are capable of is the ability to deal with massive amounts of stress, frustration, with abuse, whatever it is. Men are so capable; it's incredible. And now we take our hits, but they are so capable of dealing with massive amounts of just life, whatever life hands you. You ever heard that term, Warren? I'm sure you said it yourself, bro. I'll figure it out, right? Yeah. I'll figure
What we
it out.
do.
Yep.
That's what we do. Yep.
Literally is what we do, right? But we do that in some of the most harshest, difficult circumstances. And what I believe is one of men's superpowers that God gave to him is that ability to say, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to let this break me. I'm going to let this build me. And I'm going to find a way. Now, that's not everybody, but that's most men. And I'm going to find a way to use this and get through this and not let this kill me. And through the process of me getting through, multiple years of therapy and all kinds of stuff after the abuse, I realized that my masculinity is not defined by the things that happen to me. It's defined by the one who designed me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I do appreciate you sharing that because especially on the part of the abuse issue.
Yeah.
I've talked with plenty of men about that, and every guy feels
Really
the same. Yeah. Every guy, it's not, it's weird. It's not an epidemic, right? It's not one of those things that's 70%.
Yeah.
It's not one of those things, but it's common enough. And
so you've heard this before then.
Yeah. And men but it's also culturally different. I'm not going to call out cultures, but there are some cultures where it's more.
No, that's real.
Even.
That's real.
And and so it's one of those issues that just doesn't get talked about where it's not a size thing. Like you said, it's not a size thing because the man is often just sucking it up because that's what he's supposed to do and just accepting it because that's what he's supposed to do. But
man, can I tell you something real quick?
Happens. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm a little bit of a conversational bully. My bad, man. I grew up with 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and we're all loud all the time. So during that 2 years, man, oh my goodness, I couldn't tell you how many times the police came to my house and like the phone calls and all that stuff, and having to like excuse it away and excuse it away and excuse it away and lie, literally lie to myself about it. But one of the most probably difficult things through that whole time period was just that, like, I don't feel like a man because I just kept absorbing it. We'll say that, right? Because there was one instance where, like, I remember during the abuse, it was just punch after punch after punch. And listen, like their violence is women have to use things. They have to use things during violence towards men because their strength obviously is not equal. Even though they want to believe it is, it's not. But they will escalate until the point where they feel like, all right, now I'm finally getting a one up on them, and they'll use whatever they want. They don't care.
Oh yeah.
Like their logic is so far out the window. But to any of the men listening that have gone through this or are going through this, man, I want to challenge you right now. You are still a man, and you can ask for help. You can go and get into areas where talk to the police or talk. People will listen. Don't stop asking for help. It's okay. You can ask for help. You need to ask for help because being stuck in that place, Warren, I remember for 2 years, man, I didn't think my family would help me. I didn't think anybody would believe me. I didn't think police would believe me. I didn't think nobody would even believe me. And it got to the point where once I finally started talking about it, it took away the power that it had over emasculating me from my masculinity, whatever.
Yeah, that issue of being willing to talk through stuff, bring it to the light, basically. When you bring it to the light, when it's not hidden anymore, that really is a change. That's a game change. It doesn't matter what the issue is, whether we're talking about
an issue like
abuse or we're talking about addiction or we're talking about whatever.
That's
Once you bring it to the light, then you really have a change. So Matt, I want to ask you a question. We're talking here. We're gonna get into this idea of calling, getting into this idea of potential. We talked a bit about rediscovering masculinity, that sort of thing. Let's dig into calling then. So
Yes.
I work with a lot of men. You guys talk with a lot of men as well. Man, how does somebody start down the path of discovering their calling? Because a lot of people, they don't even know what this means when we talk about calling. Like,
It's a great
I grew up, I
question
got my
for you.
job.
It
What
is.
do I do? So Matt, why don't you
Yeah.
take it?
Yeah, I think we had just done an episode on David and Goliath, and it parallels well with calling in men's lives, because he was faithful with the little, and I think too many men are like, okay, what's my calling? I want the big thing. Like, what is it, God?
There you go.
And he's like,
Get it.
whoa. You are not ready, son. You have a lot to learn before you do that.
Yes.
And it goes back to rediscovering yourself as a man and knowing who you are and how God sees you. And the second is I'm only 28 years old. I have a wife, just got married almost 2 years ago, and no kids yet, but the family,
Soon.
the home, yeah. The family, home, and kids are your number one calling. And I think too many men miss that.
They want the bigger thing.
Yeah. Their lives are so important. And with everything going on in the world now, you have to be out there as a man, leading and protecting them. That is your number one calling. You have these drag queens that are coming in at schools, as one example. You're just gonna go after it. You have to be able to, go down the street and find Timmy Johnson's dad and hop in his white pickup and go down to the school and be like, look, this is not happening. Too many men aren't gonna want to step up and do that, but it has to be done. And I think that's where men are a little confused in that, is they're looking for the big thing. They want to be the big CEO of that humanitarian organization or whatever their dream is. And sure, you can get there, but yourself, your family, that's your number one calling.
We often run into that trap where we feel like my calling has to be huge. Like my calling has to be to change. I'm going to change the world. I am going to change poverty. Like, I'm going to change these things. And to your point, like you said, it's really at home first. And our pride gets in there, our ego gets in there, and we feel like, but if I'm not, and social media to me has amplified this and made it worse. How come I don't have 150,000 likes on my post? Look at the good that I'm doing. How come people aren't noticing? Add on to that, Rory, this idea of calling, finding calling, the giant calling versus in your home. Like, what are your thoughts there?
Oh, I got you, man. Oh, ready? Dude, I'm gonna tell you right now, one of the craziest things that I've experienced in 42 years of life is men do not master the basics. We don't master the basics. We are all about the bigger thing. We're all about, we want to slay that giant, right? But like we talked about in our giant killer episode, David didn't end up on the battlefield because he was a giant killer. He ended up on the battlefield because he was listening to his father, who overlooked him. That in of itself is crazy, because David was faithful with the little. He was faithful with the little things. He maintained his shepherdhood. He maintained watching over the flock. He kept all the little things in order. And that is the only reason that David ended up on the battlefield that day, when all of the men were not doing what men should be doing and standing up to Goliath. All of the men were intimidated and backing down. And David said, who's this uncut mother trucker? I'm going to get him. And he only ended up there because he was faithful with the little things. And so, men, I want to encourage you. It's not fun. Okay. A successful life isn't all glitz and glam. It's nothing you can post on social media. It's nothing that anyone's going to give you a like or cred for. It's mastering the basics. It's falling in line and leading your family. The greatest thing you could ever do as a man, having a family, is to lead them. And let me tell you, that will take everything you got to truly and effectively lead them, because guess what your family does? They don't fall in line. They don't listen to everything you try to lead them to do. Your children definitely do not listen to everything that you try to lead them to do. So it takes tremendous amounts of effort, tremendous amounts of repetition, and tremendous amounts of just mastering the basics in order to lead a family. But the greatest thing you could ever do, like literally the greatest thing you could ever do, man, is lead a family to be effective, to leaving a legacy in this world where, should you ever leave them, they continue on and they do what you have led them to do. I cannot think, Warren, of a greater calling than to lead the next generation.
Yeah.
There's nothing greater, but we all want something greater, right? I want the big cars. I want the big business. I want this. I want that. I want to have this big vision. And it's like, God's like, you want all this big stuff, but you ain't do nothing with the little, with the great things that I've given you. You've done nothing with what I've given you.
So if you feel that the greatest calling there is in leading the family, then I'm guessing you agree with Harrison Butker's speech of a couple weeks ago. Would that be correct?
I do 100%. 100%. And I know everyone's going to be like, what the heck? Oh my gosh, misogynist. Yeah, sure. If that's what you want to label me as, I don't care. I really don't care, because at the end of the day, look at the greatest. Okay, this is, let's break it down like this, right? The greatest relationship outside of your relationship with Christ that was designed on the face of this planet was a marriage. Greatest relationship defined. Why? Okay, because it's a triune relationship. A marriage is a triune relationship, or it should be. It's you, your spouse, and God. It's a triune, just like we worship a triune God. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, right? So we worship a triune God. So when God set up marriage, he set it up just in the same way that he set up the relationship between us and him. So that is the most sacred connection outside of your connection with Jesus. You don't think that is going to be the enemy's number one priority to break apart? Look at today's culture. Everything that we have is anti-marriage. Everything that people talk about is anti-masculinity, anti-femininity. Everything that the enemy lays out in today's culture is to destroy our families. He doesn't want the men leading. He doesn't want the women staying empowered. He doesn't want femininity and masculinity to come together, because when they do, let me tell you, true femininity and true masculinity, when they come together, you can't stop them. You can't stop them. When they embrace their roles, when the woman embraces her role and the man embraces his role, and they operate in the biblical definitions of masculinity and femininity, it is so powerful. The enemy hates it, wants it dead as fast as possible. And you look at culture, and culture will show you just how much the world hates marriage, hates it. He wants it dead, because at the end of the day, if you're operating in your calling as a husband, as a father, as a man, and if you're operating your calling as a woman, as a wife, as you know, that family unit, you're operating like that. That is how God intended. And the enemy, the only thing the enemy has, he doesn't have any new tricks, is just to pervert what is good. That's all he does.
Yeah.
So
no, he doesn't have any new tricks. It's lies, and the number one lie started in Genesis. Did God really say that? We've been
doubt
dealing with that.
Yeah.
Matt, Rory just talked there about, operating in your calling. A lot of guys, as they're working through this, and you gave some book recommendations and some ideas. What are some key questions? What are some things guys should be thinking through, asking themselves as they're trying to uncover their calling, so to speak, as they're trying to figure out what is their potential? What are some of the conversations, some of the things they should be thinking through?
Yeah, I think one of them is, did these views kind of come from the world, or did they come from God? That was kind of some of the lies I was believing too. In this world, they're, like we talked about earlier, going for the big house, the big truck, the big whatever, the materialistic version
of the
world.
I like big trucks. What the heck?
Yeah. Wait a minute. Can we the truck we can keep? Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Fine.
Yeah.
Fine. You can keep your
I'm
Tacoma.
just playing. I'm just
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that sense of, you know, the materialistic thing and going for the big guns, and those are pretty cool. Biceps are pretty awesome too. I guess I'll let you keep
I
going,
know. I
but
finally got some. Like, what's up?
but definitely, you know, saying I'm not in, like, we're not of this, we're in this world, but we're not of it. And being able to separate ourselves from that and understand what we're given and what we're called to do as men, and leading. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys too is Rory and I started, you know, working out together probably about 6 or 7 months ago.
Yep.
And I had been working out through my college career as a baseball player, and so I have a good background in this. And I wanted to bring this up earlier because it had a good parallel to what we were talking about with leading in home. And Rory, when was the last time you worked out before 6, 7 months ago?
Before 7 months ago?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Trying to embarrass me in front of everybody? Never.
Now,
like literally never.
Now, how often do you work out?
High school. Now I work out every day. Like I don't miss it. I don't miss it for anything.
And how often does your family work out? Your sons?
Well, now they started working out every other day.
Because you're leading by example.
Yeah, it's funny. I would like tell them all the time, which this is what dads do. We tell a lot of stuff, but usually what sticks for a man is what leads is what you do.
Oh yeah.
Like what you do is what's going to lead. And so if you're doing something that is non-beneficial, your kids are going to follow. Your wife's going to follow. Like I've told my family all the time, like, hey, you should be doing this. You should eat healthier. You should be doing this. Da 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 da. And the crazy thing, Warren, they didn't start doing it until I started doing it. Yeah. And I didn't even tell them. They're like, oh, dad's doing this. Dad's drinking tons of water throughout the whole day. Oh, now everybody in my family has a water bottle that they're carrying around. I'm like, what the heck happened? Oh, right. Leading by example.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I think that was kind of one of the questions too, that I had to start understanding is like, what do I need to now put into action? And what do I need to take more initiative in? And one of those things was putting more time and effort into doing things for my wife, and just seeing the benefit of that playing out. And now just both of us together, full force, like we got this, we're in this together. We're in year 2 of marriage. And, you know, statistically, year 1 is rocky. And I will admit, year 1 was rocky. It's usually how it goes.
Your first years are hardest, dude.
And, you know, now that we're in union, ready to go, and we're in the same mindset and connected, and we've talked over some questions and things that we have. And now we're full throttle, and no one's touching us. The enemy's not touching us.
Let's go, baby.
Awesome. Awesome.
I love it.
Touching on that, getting on the same page with your wife, something I've talked with guys before about, and I'd love to hear either of you, your thoughts on this one. What if the guy, it could happen in reverse, but we're talking to the men. What if the guy says, I know what my calling is, and we'll expand it right now outside of the family some. He knows what his calling is. He knows what his mission is in life. She's not on board. He knows what it is. She's not there yet. How do you recommend a guy work through that? How does he work through that time? Because that could be pretty dangerous in a marriage. It could be really difficult in the marriage. So what are some of your thoughts on that one?
You want to go first?
Yeah, the only
you fresh in it, boy.
No, I mean, I only have one solution. I mean, it worked for for me, was being in prayer with your wife. It's important for us to pray as men to our Father in our own individual personalized relationship with him, but it's also important to bring your wife into it too, and what what God wants for you as a union, like Rory said earlier, you three, and the calling for your marriage, because there's definitely a calling there too.
Right.
You know, there's a testimony in every single relationship, what you've gone through, as husband and wife. And that's just the one important thing I would say is making the time, because we can't take time now. There's way too many things to do. You got to make time for the things that are important. And pray with your wife and family, kids, if you have them. And that's one. I know it sounds like a typical stupid answer, but
dude, it's alignment. It's alignment.
You have to do it.
Yeah. You're literally, what you're talking about, Matt, is you're talking about alignment, because you're bringing the marriage underneath that Trinity again. If you remove God from that, it's two individuals who are, yes, they're united as one, but you don't have that leading power. You don't have that leading guiding force of Jesus. You don't have that. When you don't have that, you're going to be all over the place. So like you were saying, Warren, so the woman isn't aligned. Okay, let's talk about it like that. When the woman is aligned, good luck. Good luck. Because if that alignment is not there, it's going to steer all over the place. And then also, when I say good luck forcing her to get under that. You're not going to be able to force her. You're not going to be able to do that. To try to domineer and control and force the woman, hey, this is what we do, blah, blah, blah. She's going to tell you where to go. Especially if she knows the Lord. What I think what Matt was saying too is you're bringing it under alignment. And so what you've got to do is you've got to lead again by example. Hey, we're going to talk to God about where we get our information from. We're going to talk to God about what we're doing on this week or this day. We're going to talk to God about how we're dealing with our problems. We're going to talk to God, and we're going to use, so it's the constant going back to Jesus, the constant going back to the source of guidance, truth, love, all of that, in order to lead us. And I'll tell you this, men, this is one of the most powerful things you can do, because if she knows that you're being led by God, she'll trust you more than she ever would trust anybody else. If she knows that you're being led by God, because I know, listen, as a pastor, I know a lot of women who they're like, I want to trust my husband, but I know he's not being led by God, and they have a problem with it. They will not trust their husband to the nth degree. They do trust him, but they have like this invisible threshold that they stop at, because they know that, hey, you're not spending time in the word. You're not spending time in prayer. You're not being led. I know you're not being led by God. So I can't follow that.
Yeah.
And so guys, when you know she's not following, it's probably because you're not leading. You're not being led by the one who's supposed to be leading you.
Right.
And so if you really want to get her underneath that leadership, your first, utmost, best, most powerful move that you can make is be led by God. Be led by him. And she will, in what do you call that? In I don't know. Anyway, I can't think of the term. But like outside of that, if you're following him, she'll start following you.
And
it's going to take some time, but she will follow you.
Yeah. And I will say this to the men, because I have gone through this myself in the getting into the word and understanding it can seem like a chore at times. And just a task to check off. Okay, I did it. I'm in. But the important thing, and to be able to get that mindset of this is a chore. Okay, I have to do it. Is you have to be able to want to discover that personal relationship aspect, the deep, loving, caring part of God.
That's right.
And that's the most important thing moving forward in your relationship with the Lord, and being able to put off that mundane task of reading Hebrews and what's going on. It's I would say the most important thing. I mean, you don't want to be the guy that understands or looks at scripture and knows it like the back of his hand and is out there condemning people, and that's not what I'm saying. But you need a base knowledge of your Bible and understanding of what God wants for you in your life.
That's right.
Yeah, if you don't know the Bible, at the basic level, it's very difficult. That's the roadmap. If you don't have
that's right.
this roadmap, you can't follow it. You're just making up stuff all on your own then, because you don't actually know. Yeah, you don't know where you're going. Rory,
and as guys, we hate. Sorry, as guys, we hate to do that. We want to know what we're doing. We want to have a plan. We want to have somebody like, hey, blah 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 blah. Like, and I know we do a lot of making up our own deals, but in the process, like, you don't know where you're headed. Warren, you nailed it, bro. You don't know where you're headed. Why wouldn't you want a guideline? Why wouldn't you want guardrails of life? Why wouldn't you want how to lead better, how to be a better dad, how to be a better husband, how to be a better man? Why wouldn't you want that?
Right.
Every man wants that. Get in your word, bro.
Yeah. And if we're going to say that we are Christians and we believe in Jesus, one of the things Jesus talks about is that he expects you to do what he says. It's that he spoke of that. He said, why do you call me Lord and not do what I told you to do? So he's expecting us. He's expecting us to do this. So if we're following him.
Jesus was such a savage. Jesus. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Jesus was an absolute savage.
Yeah.
And
hey, Rory, I wanted to come back to something.
Why do you know that? Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to come back to something because I liked what Matt said earlier. Wrote down one of the questions, one of the things in figuring this out is this thing, I'm just saying, I'm paraphrasing, is this thing from the world or is this from God? And that's something that a lot of people could struggle with. So not just because the worldly stuff is so good looking, it's so tempting, not just but it's difficult. We will often get in our own head and say, I think this is what God wants me to do, but maybe it's just what I want to do. And I think that this is his, but maybe it's just the world. So I want you to add on a little bit to that, of this distinction between something that's from the world and something that's from God.
So you're saying, how do you tell the difference?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's actually a pretty easy one. The difference between a calling and your own creation of a calling would be your true calling. You can't do it without God. You can't do it without God. There have been many things that I have done in my life that I'm like, hey, I know how to do this. I've put in the hours. I paid my dues. I literally have the knowledge to do this, so I'll do it. That is my ability. That's done out of my own strength, my own knowledge, my own ability. When you know it's a calling, you can't do it out of your own strength. You can't do it out of your own knowledge or the knowledge you have currently. And you can't do it out of your own ability, because you look at that and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, listen, when I was about like 20 years old, my life started to change in dramatic ways where God was leading me to bigger things. And I had no ability. I had no idea how to do it. The only thing I was just crazy enough to do was say yes. Say yes to God. I didn't have the abilities. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have the know-how. I had none of it. And God was like, will you do this? I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, sure, let's go. I don't know how to do it, but I'll follow you because I said I was going to follow you, right? So when you know it's a calling, God's going to lead you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, lead you to do things that you aren't able to do. He's going to lead you to do things that you're like, there's no way, God, I can do that. Watch me. God's like, hold my communion cup. I got you. Literally, he will lead you to do things. So, if you want to decipher between calling and your own drive, because listen, I'm a pretty ambitious man, and most of the guys I know, they're ambitious men. They want to build and create things. This is how God created us. So I know that there's a lot in my own ambition that I want to do just in myself. But then there's that top tier stuff that I'm like, there's no way I would have been able to do this or been led to do this unless it was God. And so that's all I got to say about that one. If you want to know if it's a calling, you shouldn't be able to do it by yourself.
Yeah.
That's a calling.
That's a great distinction. Yeah. It's a great marker. It's a great way to know. Yeah. Cause it's not a calling for me to walk upstairs. I can handle that. Yeah. I can handle that.
Yep.
Matt, something for you. So for a lot of guys, it is much easier to just float wherever, just go with the flow.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys will take that route because they're afraid of going opposite. They're afraid of going in a different direction. So what about that? What about a guy who's just sort of saying, you know what, I think I might know what my calling is, but I'm afraid to go there. I want to stick with the flow. I want to do the easy thing. I'm just going to settle for this. Like, what about that guy?
Bro, shoot those passive guys. Shoot them in the leg, Matt.
I will say this. It is, like Rory said, it's the humble yes. And understanding that the only thing in your way is fear and yourself. I will share this as an example. I absolutely hate public speaking. And a year and a half ago, when we were on a plane back, Rory and I were on a plane back from a trip. I just had this before that, I was like, hey, why don't you do a podcast, Rory? Like, you're pretty good at talking and like, you know, a lot of stuff. Why don't you do it? And he was like, well, I'd want you on there with me. And I'm like, whoa. That's not
Wait a minute.
That's not my thing. And, you know, fast forward to 2 years later and, you know, this is kind of one of the examples that God had put in my life and said, you need to speak in other men's lives and, you know, help them. Men need help. And, you know, he brought along someone that loves to talk and handle the other side for me. And Rory's been doing an awesome job and getting this podcast up and running. And we just had a blast doing this. And I never, if I said, okay, I want to start a podcast on my own and do it by myself, I would have been done months, probably a year ago. But the way that God had designed this and put this podcast together, it's just been a blast. And just, I couldn't imagine it any other way. This is just fun doing that, talking to other people, and meeting people and just seeing the small impact that it's had, just in the year and a half. So I will share that as an example.
Awesome. Rory, what about you? What about the guy that's just kind of floating down the river, afraid to do anything different than what he's already doing? What about that guy?
I have a very strong opinion about those guys, and those guys that are listening right now are going to get really mad at me, but I don't care. Passive men are one of the biggest problems that we have in this world right now, because they are what I would call 100% lukewarm. And the Bible talks about how I'd rather you to be hot or cold than lukewarm, because if you're lukewarm, I will spew you out of my mouth. Lukewarm is the people who can't make a decision. Lukewarm is the people who can't pick a side. Like, literally, I'd rather you pick the opposition than stay in the middle. Like, in that scripture, what I truly and genuinely believe is it's teaching us is you have to drive and understand, and you have to have things to stand on. You have to have a foundation to stand in. You have to stand on God's word. And those who cannot make a decision are, and there's other scriptures that talk about the two-faced man who is blown with the wind. You know, if you cannot make a decision on leading, you can't make a decision on being the man that God's called you to be, you can't make a decision, you're just gonna go with the flow. Well, then you're literally being led by the world and the enemy, because the flow goes one way. It's downhill, down the sewer, all the way down the slippery slope. The flow, like you look at the path of water, okay, the science of water and how water flows. Water flows with what? The path of least resistance, right? So if you're going with the flow, you're going through the path of least resistance, which means you're following the path all the way to hell. Like, I'll be that extreme to say that. You're going with the flow. You're following the path all the way down to the enemy's lair, because you're not doing what you were designed to do. Men were designed to stand up. They were designed to lead. This is what Adam got wrong at the very beginning. The first mistake, like everybody wants to give Eve a bad rap, like, oh, Eve, you idiot, you ate the apple. Hey, Adam, you stupid moron, you didn't lead. You stood there and you watched her do it, and you didn't say a dang thing. Oh, how dare you? How dare you? Adam was passive in that moment. And his passivity led to the fall of man. So men, if you are passive and you don't lead, this is what happens. And this is why, like, I get so frustrated with it, because and I'm not saying this because I'm perfect. Oh God, no. I've made many mistakes, many problems, and there are times where I haven't led, okay? And knowing that, it just infuriates me against myself even more. It's like, you better lead. Because if you don't, there are dramatic consequences that come from your lack of leadership, men. Yeah. So passive men, if you have a problem or a struggle with asserting, and listen, I know some people are like just kind of naturally like that, right? They're like, I don't really want to care too much about this. I kind of just go with the flow, like you said, Warren. Care more, be intentional, like start training yourself to be more intentional, in certain circumstances in your marriage and this, and just start to do it. I know guys like this, and literally they ask me the same question all the time. How do I lead? I don't know how to lead. And 9 times out of 10 is because their dad never taught them. Yeah. Or somebody in their life didn't teach them, they didn't know. So they're like, I don't know how to lead. And this is always my response. Start leading in a few things. Start leading in the little things. Start leading in the home when it comes to, hey, let's keep a nice home. Let's organize this. Let's not let it go to chaos. Oh, well, I really don't care. It's not a problem. It doesn't upset me. No, be intentional. You need to be intentional. And if you start taking, men who are struggling with passivity, if you start taking little intentional steps, eventually you will train your mind and you'll train your abilities to be more inept in leading. And it's just a step-by-step process.
Yeah. I want to add on one quick thing, just a brief add on that people sometimes overlook on the Adam and Eve, and we'll call it the apple. I know for you Bible scholars, say apple, we know what we're talking about. So in that story, Eve takes the fruit. Adam's there watching. Adam later takes the fruit. But notice when God shows on the scene, so to speak, God doesn't say anything to Eve. God calls out Adam.
Yes,
God doesn't call out Eve.
Yes.
It was Adam's responsibility. God called him out. And we need to recognize that and notice that. It doesn't mean necessarily that if a guy's listening and his wife does something wrong, that God's going to show up and blame the husband. That's not necessarily what we're saying here. But in that example that we have, a sin occurred.
Yep.
God points to Adam and says, dude, what's up? And so Adam did get called out.
Where were you?
We need to remember that. As we get
that's huge
to wrap, as we get close to wrapping up on our hour, I always like to give guests an opportunity for something that we may have missed. So we're talking about this idea of calling and how important this is for men. We've touched on a lot of other topics. What is something that you want to make sure you leave guys with? You could repeat something or reemphasize something or a totally different point that we didn't get to. What is something about calling that you want to leave guys with? And I'll give each of you guys a chance.
Yeah, sure. The one thing I'll say that we like to mention on our podcast too is brotherhood and the importance of having men, good quality men that fear the Lord, and having them around you for when times get tough and there's some decisions that you need to make and things may not be so clear. You have to have men in your life that you can lean on so you can get through some of the tough times. You can't do it. The lone wolf mentality, it doesn't work.
No.
You're created to be in a pack with other like-minded men to kill the enemy, to destroy the enemy, be dangerous towards the enemy, and be able to fulfill your calling with other men by your side. It's one of the important things that I would say.
Yeah, that's huge. That's you can be way more effective. Yeah.
Yep.
I got one for you. Don't live a copycat calling. Don't live a copycat calling. Like we as men, we look around, we compare ourselves. We start at an early age comparison, and then we just keep going if we're not checked. And don't live a copycat calling. Don't look at what another guy has and then mimic everything he does, because the Bible teaches us that we're all created uniquely and and totally different from any other physical human being that ever was, is, or ever will be. So that means that God has equipped you with things that no one else has. It means that God has given you a calling that nobody else has. And there are other people along this journey who are waiting on your calling in order to embrace theirs. You have a responsibility, a duty, if you will, to fulfill what God has called you to do. And it's going to be unique. It's not going to look like other people's things. And so I would just encourage guys, like if you're struggling, well, what is my calling? What am I looking for here? What's more? Where am I going? It's not going to necessarily, it might look similar to other guys, but it's not going to look identical. So don't live a copycat calling. And in the world, social media and all the influences that we have in our lives, there's so many people that are copying everything. It's crazy. I mean, you look at our churches, and all of our churches copy each other. They all do the same thing, and they all run the same service and the same kind of this and the same, they all use the same devices and all this stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, God created you uniquely. Why aren't you uniquely using yourself to reach people, to fulfill your calling? You're just looking like everybody else. That doesn't make any sense. So I just encourage you guys, like, God's going to call you to a unique calling, fulfill it, and be okay with not copying one another. Live the way that God has intended you to live.
Yeah, that's a great way to wrap. Live the way God intended you to live. So if guys want to connect with you, if they want to find your show, where do they go? How do they do that?
We are currently in the process of launching our website. I would say a couple more weeks on that.
5 days.
All right. 5 days. So don't go there yet, but 5 days. Dangerousmanpodcast.com. And then we're on all the Spotify apps, the Dangerous Man Podcast.
Yeah, Spotify, Apple, literally every single podcast app that you can find. We're all over all of them. Just type in the Dangerous Man Podcast. Look for the little skull microphone with the little lightning coming out. That's the one. That's where you can find us.
Cool.
I appreciate your time.
And what's the story behind the name? Well, we'll wrap up there. Dangerous Man. What's the story behind the name?
Dude, dangerous for good. Jesus was absolutely so counterculture and so dangerous that they killed him. So absolutely dangerous for good. That's literally, how Jesus operated in his life and what he did just by his words and teaching alone got him on a list to be killed by the religious elite. And so we talk about dangerous man because for a man to truly live identified by God, you will be an extremely dangerous man.
Love it.
Thank you, awesome. Warren. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah. Thanks for your time today, guys. It was a great conversation. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thank you, boss.
Thanks.
Yeah, you got it.